Avery Carter's mornings had turned into a quiet routine. Quiet not because life was peaceful, but because she had trained herself to move like a whisper. She stood in the dim kitchen before sunrise, flipping eggs, brewing coffee, and folding laundry as the washing machine hummed behind her. Somewhere along the years, Avery had learned that silence was the safest way to survive inside her own home. At exactly 6:00 a.m., Mason Hale descended the stairs. He looked polished as always, crisp shirt, expensive cologne, eyes glued to his phone. Without even glancing toward Avery, he sat at the table. Avery placed a mug of black coffee and a warm breakfast in front of him. Mason took one sip and frowned. "The coffee's bitter," he muttered flatly, still scrolling. "Sorry," Avery whispered. "I must have mismeasured." He didn't respond. He simply nudged the plate aside and ate a few bites in silence. Avery stood nearby, waiting for a word, any word, but none came. The only warmth in the kitchen appeared moments later when Nora's tiny footsteps came down the stairs. The 7-year-old ran into the room with a bright smile that lit up whatever Mason's coldness had dimmed. "Good morning, Mommy. Good morning, Daddy." Mason finally put down his phone long enough to give his daughter a small, practiced smile. "Morning, Princess. Daddy's taking you to school today." "Really?" Nora beamed. Avery exhaled in relief. Mason was at least gentle to Nora, at least on the surface. After breakfast, Mason rushed out with Nora, walking right past Avery as though she were part of the furniture. No goodbye, no glance, nothing but the sound of his luxury car disappearing down the street. The house fell silent again. Avery turned to her chores, cleaning dishes, wiping counters, folding laundry, tidying rooms. She told herself that if she kept everything spotless, if she stayed calm, if she didn't raise her voice, maybe the man she once loved would return. But deep down, she knew he was long gone. At noon, Avery picked Nora up from school. Listening to her daughter chatter about her day was the only bright moment of her routine. But that brightness dimmed the moment they stepped onto the porch. A courier called her name. Delivery for Avery Carter. She frowned. She hadn't ordered anything. The man handed her a thick brown envelope stamped with the logo of a prestigious law firm. Her heart instantly tightened. Inside the house, she opened it with trembling hands. The first line made her breath vanish. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her eyes blurred. Plaintiff, Mason Hale defended, Avery Carter. He accused her of being emotionally unstable, of failing as a wife, of being unfit to raise Nora. Worst of all, he demanded full custody and every asset, including the house she had built her life in. The papers slipped from her hands as she fell to the floor. He had planned this. Every ounce of coldness, every distant glance, every silent morning, all of it had been preparing for this fatal strike, and Avery didn't yet know this was only the beginning. As Avery struggles to breathe beneath the weight of the betrayal, the front door clicks open. Mason is home early, and he already knows she's read the papers. Avery was still sitting on the hardwood floor when the sound of the front door unlocking jolted through her like an electric current. The divorce papers lay scattered around her like fallen leaves after a storm. Her heartbeat pounded painfully in her chest. Mason had come home hours earlier than usual. He stepped into the living room, loosening his tie as if returning from an ordinary day. His eyes fell on the scattered documents, then on Avery collapsed beside them. He didn't look surprised, not even irritated. He looked satisfied. "Mason," Avery's voice cracked as she stood, the papers trembling in her hand. "What is this? What have you done?" He said nothing while removing his shoes with calculated calm. Then he approached her as if she were a stranger. "It's exactly what you read," he said coldly. "I'm done living with you, Avery. You failed. Failed as a wife. Failed as a mother." Her breath caught. "I've done everything for this family. I've taken care of Nora, maintained the house, supported." "Supported?" Mason let out a cruel laugh. You've only drained me. All you do is spend my money while pretending to be some perfect homemaker." Avery staggered backward, stunned. That's not fair. You know I gave up my career because you asked me to. Because you were terrible at it," he snapped. Just like you're terrible at everything else. Tears welled in Avery's eyes. Please, Mason, you can't take Nora from me. You can't take the house. You can't. He leaned in close, lowering his voice into a venomous whisper. I can, and I will. Her entire body went numb. My lawyer has built a perfect case, he continued, straightening his tie as though discussing business instead of dismantling a family. Photos, statements, psychological reports, you won't get a cent. You'll walk out of here with nothing. Avery shook her head in disbelief. You're lying? Psychological reports? From who? His expression sharpened into something darker. Oh, Avery, you're going to love the expert witness they lined up. She froze. What did you tell Nora? She whispered, dread coiling in her chest. Mason smirked. Let's just say she understands who the real problem is. Her knees weakened. Then his voice dropped another octave filled with malice she had never heard before. And when we go to court, even your own daughter will prove you're unfit. No, Avery mouthed. You wouldn't. You have no idea what I'm capable of. He moved past her, heading toward the stairs. Oh, and Avery? She didn't answer. Start packing. He paused, turning just enough to let her see the satisfaction in his eyes. The judge will hand me custody. You're done. That night, Mason slept in the guest room as if nothing had happened. Avery didn't sleep at all. She stayed in Nora's room, watching her daughter breathe softly, terrified of losing the one thing Mason could never understand, the heart of a mother. Little did she know, Mason had already emptied their joint account, transferred their savings, even taken her heirlooms. He had been dismantling her life one quiet step at a time, and tomorrow would bring an even darker blow. By morning, Avery discovers Mason hasn't just filed for divorce, he has financially destroyed her, and she is about to learn just how deep his betrayal goes. Sunlight streamed through the curtains when Avery finally blinked her exhausted eyes open. She hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night sitting beside Nora's bed, watching her daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, terrified of what tomorrow might steal from her. By morning, Mason acted as if the previous night had never happened. He woke Nora gently, made her breakfast, even braided her hair, something he hadn't done in years. He played the role of the perfect father flawlessly. When Nora asked, "Why are Mommy's eyes red?" Mason simply said, "Mommy's not feeling well, sweetheart." And with that small, poisonous lie, he guided their daughter out the door, leaving Avery in the kind of silence that hums with panic. The moment they left, Avery sprang into action. She couldn't let Mason take Nora without a fight. She needed a lawyer. She needed help. She needed money. Her hands trembled as she opened her banking app. Their joint account, the one Mason always referred to as their family safety net, should have held years of savings. She typed her password. The screen loaded. Balance $0. Avery froze. Her breath caught, trapped painfully in her throat. No, 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 please, no. She refreshed the screen again and again. Still zero. Her heart thudded violently as she opened the transaction history. 6 months' worth of transfers, all in large amounts, all taken by Mason, all funneled into an unknown account. The last withdrawal, 3 days ago, the day before the divorce papers arrived. He had drained everything. Every dime, every bit of security, every escape route she might have had. Avery covered her mouth as a sob tore through her. He had trapped her. Without money, she couldn't hire a lawyer. Without a lawyer, she couldn't fight him. Without a fight, she would lose Nora. Her vision blurred as she stumbled to her bedroom, desperate for any form of value. Jewelry. She needed jewelry. She pulled open her jewelry box. Empty. Her wedding rings? Gone. Her grandmother's locket? Gone. The gold bangles she'd inherited? Gone. Only cheap imitation pieces remained. He had taken everything, quietly, deliberately. Her legs gave out and she sank to the floor. For a moment, Avery let herself break. Her hands shook. Her breath came in gasps. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, she felt sick. But she forced herself upright. She couldn't stop. She couldn't collapse. Not with Nora at stake. A name suddenly flashed in her memory. A friend who once mentioned a low-cost legal aid office. Her last hope. Avery grabbed her phone and dialed her friend with trembling fingers, explaining everything between sobs. Her friend grew quiet on the other end, then said softly, Avery, I can't help much, but I know someone who might. His name is Attorney Abernathy. Small office. Works from a strip mall. Not expensive, but very, very good. It wasn't the ideal solution, but it was something. With the few dollars she had left in her wallet, Avery took a cab to the shabby building. The paint on the walls was peeling, the stairs creaked, his office was small and cluttered, but the man who greeted her, Attorney Abernathy, looked kind. Tell me everything, he said, and when Avery finished, his face darkened. This is going to be a war, he murmured. Avery has found a lawyer, but Mason has built an entire arsenal of fake evidence, and the first file Abernathy opens leaves Avery shaking. Attorney Abernathy's office smelled faintly of old books and strong coffee. Papers were stacked neatly across his desk, and a single lamp glowed warmly in the dim room. Despite the modest setting, something about his presence felt steady, like an anchor in the middle of a storm. Everything your husband has done, Abernathy said slowly, was planned months in advance. Avery swallowed hard. I know, but what evidence does he even have? The attorney picked up a thick manila folder. This came from the courthouse. It's the exact filing Mason submitted. Avery braced herself as he opened it. The first stack of papers slid forward. Photographs, captured from inside her home, dirty dishes piled in the sink, toys thrown across the living room, laundry heaped carelessly in baskets. Avery stared blankly before whispering, these were taken when I was sick. I had a fever for 3 days. I couldn't even stand. Mason refused to help. Abernathy nodded grimly. He took these intentionally, to make you look incompetent. Avery's stomach twisted. The husband who once promised to protect her had instead used her weakest moments to build a case against her. The attorney flipped to the next section, credit card statements. Avery's name was printed clearly at the top. Charges from luxury boutiques, high-end restaurants, jewelry stores, spa packages, and every line item stared back like an accusation. I've never bought any of this, Avery whispered. I didn't even know he used that card. Mason always took it, said his main card was maxed out. I trusted him. And he used that trust against you, Abernathy replied. He made sure the purchases looked like yours. Avery's hands trembled in her lap. How do I prove I didn't make these charges? It won't be easy, he admitted, but the truth has a way of surfacing. Then he opened a final document, this one thicker, stamped with a psychologist's seal. This, he said quietly, is the biggest problem. Avery leaned in. The first page alone made her blood turn cold. Psychological evaluation report expert witness, Dr. Sophia Ward Abernathy summarized. She claims to have observed you for months, at the mall, at the park, during Nora's school pickup. According to her, you're emotionally unstable, prone to panic, inattentive to your daughter, and incapable of providing a healthy environment. Avery's jaw dropped open. I've never even met her, she cried. I would remember something like that. How could she write this? She claims the observations were done covertly from a distance. That's legal. Avery shook her head desperately. But Nora is always happy with me. I pay attention to her. This is all wrong. Abernathy looked at her with quiet sympathy. Mason didn't just find a psychologist. He found one willing to twist reality in his favor. And her credentials check out. She's legit. A chill ran down Avery's spine. Sophia Ward. The name felt like an omen. Why would she do this? Avery whispered. Abernathy exhaled. There are two possibilities. Either she's being paid handsomely, or she has a personal motive. Avery didn't know it yet, not fully, but something in her chest tightened. A faint echo of a scent she remembered on one of Mason's shirts. A perfume she couldn't place. She shook the thought away. She had bigger problems. Abernathy closed the folder. Avery, your husband isn't just divorcing you. He's trying to erase you. He wants everything. Your daughter, your home, your dignity. Avery swallowed her fear, sitting a little straighter. What do we do? He gave her a firm look. We fight. And we start with one thing. We need to stay ahead of any new moves Mason makes. If only they knew the next move was already underway. That night, Avery returns home, and Mason begins poisoning Nora's mind more aggressively than ever. But behind Nora's pillow lies a secret Avery still hasn't discovered. The house no longer felt like a home when Avery returned that evening. It felt like enemy territory, like walking into a trap set by someone who knew her better than she knew herself. Mason was in the living room with Nora, his voice bright and sweet, the very picture of fatherly affection. A large pink gift box sat on the couch beside them. Nora's eyes sparkled. "Mommy, look!" she called out as Avery stepped inside. "Daddy got me a new tablet. It has a big screen and cute games." Mason smirked as he handed the sleek device back to Nora. "When you live with Daddy," he said casually, "you'll have things like this all the time." The words were coated in sugar, but Avery heard the poison underneath. Nora giggled innocently. "Really?" Avery's throat tightened. Mason knew exactly what he was doing, using gifts as bait, replacing love with shiny distractions. She forced a smile for her daughter. "That's lovely, sweetheart. Go wash your hands before dinner." Nora ran to the bathroom. The moment she was out of earshot, Mason leaned back on the sofa, folding his arms with a victorious smirk. "You can't compete, Avery," he whispered. "You have nothing to offer her." Avery clenched her jaw. "You don't get to buy her love." He shrugged. "I don't need to. I just need to show the court she's happier with me, and she will be." Avery wanted to scream, but she held it in. She remembered Abernathy's warning. If Mason could provoke her, he would use every reaction against her, so she stayed silent. For the rest of the evening, Mason undermined her in subtle, calculated ways. If Avery prepared dinner, he'd taste the food dramatically and comment, "Salty again. Guess we'll just order takeout tomorrow." If she helped Nora with her homework, he'd interrupt with, "Let me. Mommy makes things too confusing." "Don't worry. Daddy will teach you right." Every jab chipped away at Avery's confidence. Every comment made Nora hesitate, unsure of whose words to believe. But the worst moment came later. Nora curled up on the couch with her brand new tablet. But when Avery walked past her bedroom to tidy up, she noticed something strange. Under Nora's pillow, something protruded slightly, something old, with a cracked corner. Avery gently lifted the pillow. Nora's old, broken tablet lay there, tucked away as if it were a treasure. The screen was chipped, the casing scratched. She hadn't played with it in months. Why keep this one hidden? Why not throw it away once the new tablet arrived? Avery frowned. Her daughter wasn't usually sentimental about old gadgets. "Nora," she whispered softly when Nora entered the room later. "Why is your old tablet still here?" Nora hesitated. "I like it," she said quickly. "The new one is for games. This one's mine." The answer didn't sit right with Avery. Nora's eyes darted away as if she were hiding something. But Avery was too exhausted, too emotionally drained to press further. She didn't know this small clue, that cracked tablet beneath the pillow, would one day crack Mason's entire plan wide open. That night, Avery lay awake staring at the ceiling. The lies, the manipulation, the fear of losing Nora, it all felt suffocating. But a storm was building, one that would soon sweep the truth into the light in ways Avery never expected. The next day, Mason crosses a line, taking Nora without warning. And when he returns that night smelling of someone else, Avery realizes the betrayal runs even deeper. The next afternoon was supposed to be simple. Avery had promised Nora chocolate cake after school, something to bring a little sweetness back into the chaos of their lives. She checked the time repeatedly, waiting by the living room window, mixing batter every few minutes just to stay busy. Dismissal time passed. 5 minutes, 10, 20. No Nora. Her nerves tightened. She called the school with shaking hands. "Mrs. Carter, Nora was already picked up," the secretary said. Her father signed her out. Avery felt the blood drain from her face. Mason hadn't told her anything. Not a text, not a call, nothing. She dialed his number. No answer. Again, voicemail. Minutes turned into hours. Avery paced the living room like a trapped animal, every possibility stabbing at her mind. Was Nora safe? Where had he taken her? Why wouldn't he answer? The clock hit 9 p.m. before the sound of Mason's car finally reached the driveway. Avery yanked open the door as soon as he stepped out with Nora skipping happily beside him, holding a colorful bag of toys. "Mommy," Nora laughed, "Daddy took me to Wonderland Park." "Look what I won." Avery dropped to her knees, hugging her tightly. "Baby, you scared me. Why didn't Daddy tell me he was taking you?" Nora blinked innocently. "Daddy said you were busy." Avery turned to Mason, who stood casually, amusement flickering in his eyes. "You took her without a word," Avery said, her voice trembling with fury. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was?" Mason shrugged. "Calm down. She's my daughter. I don't need your permission to spend time with her." "You should have told me," Avery shouted. "Why?" he shot back. "So you could drown her in your anxiety? I did her a favor." Avery stepped back, stunned. But then something hit her, something invisible at first, something familiar yet wrong, a scent, a woman's perfume, soft, floral, expensive, not Avery's. Avery hadn't worn perfume in days. Her eyes dropped to Mason's shirt. He noticed, and he smirked. Nora darted inside to play with her toys. Mason waited until she was out of earshot before leaning closer, voice dripping with venom. "You smell it, don't you?" Avery's stomach twisted. "Who is she, Mason?" His grin deepened into cruelty. "You really think I'd stay forever with a boring wife who does nothing but cry and fold laundry? Sophia is everything you're not. Successful, smart, desirable." Avery's heart stopped. "Sophia?" she whispered. "Dr. Cruel." "Sophia Ward?" "The one and only," he whispered proudly. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Avery stumbled, gripping the wall to steady herself. The psychologist, the one who claimed Avery was unstable, the one who wrote the report, the one Mason brought into their case, was also the woman he was with. Avery's knees nearly gave out. "You're disgusting," she breathed. Mason chuckled as he walked past her. "Get used to it. When this divorce is finalized, Sophia will be the one helping raise Nora." Nora peeked out from her room, eyes wide, sensing tension. "Mommy? Are you okay?" Avery wiped her tears and forced steadiness into her voice. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Mommy's right here." But inside she was breaking, because Mason wasn't just trying to take her daughter, he was trying to erase her. The more Mason manipulates Nora, the more Avery fears losing her. But the next step in Mason's plan comes fast. The mediation hearing, where Avery gets her first taste of the courtroom battle ahead. The mediation room was smaller than Avery expected, windowless, stuffy, and suffocating. A long table sat in the center with 4 chairs on each side, but the real weight in the room came from the people occupying them. Across from Avery sat Mason, flawless in a tailored suit, wearing an expression of polite concern that made her stomach twist. Beside him was Attorney Cromwell, a sleek man with a too bright smile and eyes sharp enough to cut paper. He looked like someone who enjoyed destroying people for sport. Avery sat with Attorney Abernathy, whose calm presence was the only thing keeping her breathing. The mediator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, began with a practiced smile. "We are here to find a peaceful agreement. Let's keep voices calm and aim for resolution." Abernathy nodded. "We're open to discussion." Cromwell leaned forward immediately, voice dripping with confidence. "There is very little to discuss." Avery's pulse quickened. Cromwell flipped open a folder, his nails tapping the table with smug rhythm. "Our client, Mr. Hale, seeks full custody of Nora and all marital assets. Mrs. Carter's emotional instability, inability to maintain the home, and financial irresponsibility have been well documented." "Well documented?" Abernathy repeated, his tone controlled but dangerous. "You mean manipulated." Mason made a show of sighing. "I'm only doing what's best for my daughter. Nora needs stability." Avery flinched. He said those words with such sincerity, like he truly believed she wasn't good enough to raise her own child. Abernathy pressed gently. "Mason, Avery is willing to negotiate custody. Shared custody is reasonable." Cromwell slammed the folder shut. "No, absolutely not. Our evidence is overwhelming. If Mrs. Carter insists on dragging this out, we will take it to trial and she will lose. Badly." Avery's breath hitched. This isn't about evidence. This is about you wanting to destroy me. Mason didn't even look at her. You already destroyed yourself. The mediator tried to intervene. Let's remain respectful. Cromwell cut her off. The offer is simple. Avery leaves the house with nothing and agrees to give full custody to Mason. In return, Mason will not file a counterclaim for emotional damages. Abernathy's pen snapped in his hand. That is not an offer. That is extortion. Avery felt heat rise in her chest as the reality hit her. They had cornered her by design. Every photo, every fake financial charge, every twisted report from Dr. Sophia Ward, all crafted to strip her of her daughter. Tears blurred her vision. You can't take Nora, she whispered. She needs me. I'm her mother. Mason finally met her eyes. She needs stability, he said in a low, cold voice. Something you're incapable of providing. The mediator sighed in defeat. It's clear this mediation cannot continue. As the meeting dissolved into tension and cold glares, Abernathy stood and touched Avery's shoulder gently. Don't let them see you break, he whispered. We're going to fight. But Avery felt broken, more than broken, shattered. She knew the trial would be far worse, especially with Sophia's testimony looming over her like a storm cloud. As they stepped into the hallway, Mason walked past her close enough for only Avery to hear. Say your goodbyes early, he murmured. Nora won't be calling you Mom much longer. Avery's heart collapsed, but she didn't know that the one person who could save her, little Nora, was quietly preparing the truth. The trial begins, and Mason unleashes his full arsenal of twisted photos, fake financial records, and Sophia's devastating expert testimony. Avery's world is about to crumble on the stand. The courtroom was colder than Avery expected, its tall wooden walls swallowing any sense of comfort. The judge's bench towered above them, and every shuffle, whisper, and cough echoed like thunder. Avery sat beside Attorney Abernathy, her palms sweating despite how tightly she clasped them in her lap. Across the aisle, Mason looked composed, confident, victorious. Attorney Cromwell adjusted his tie and wore the smug smile of a man who knew his case was stacked mercilessly in his favor. The trial began. Cromwell stood and launched into his opening argument with theatrical precision. Your Honor, this case is not about punishment. It is about saving a child from an unstable environment. He held up the photos, Avery's home at its worst moments. This is the environment Mrs. Carter provides. Filth, disorder, neglect. Avery wanted to scream that she had been sick, that Mason had orchestrated it, but Abernathy gently tapped her leg. Not yet. Cromwell displayed the credit card statements next. Lavish spending, irresponsible purchases, all under Mrs. Carter's name. Again, Avery bit her tongue, swallowing the desperation rising inside her. And then Cromwell delivered the final blow. Your Honor, we call our expert witness Dr. Sophia Ward. A chill rushed through Avery's body. The doors opened. Sophia walked in wearing a tailored dark blazer, hair neatly tied back, her presence radiating polished authority. She took the oath, her gaze steady, lips curved in a faint professional smile, one that hid the venom Avery had already felt from afar. Sophia's perfume drifted across the room, and Avery's stomach twisted violently. It was the same scent she had smelled on Mason's shirt the night he returned with that mysterious fragrance, the same scent that haunted her suspicions. Cromwell began. Dr. Cromwell began. Ward, could you explain your observations? Sophia folded her hands gracefully. For 3 months, I conducted naturalistic observations of Mrs. Avery Carter and her daughter, Nora. Avery's mouth fell open. 3 months? She'd never even seen the woman before the lawsuit. Sophia continued smoothly. I witnessed concerning behavioral patterns. For instance, at a shopping mall, Mrs. Carter grabbed Nora's arm and raised her voice, causing the child to cry. Avery gasped. That's not what happened. At a local park, Mrs. Carter appeared distracted on her phone while Nora played unsupervised. When Nora fell, Mrs. Carter reacted hysterically, creating further emotional distress. The lies were delivered with clinical precision. Every word stabbed Avery deeper. Sophia concluded with icy confidence. In my professional opinion, Mrs. Carter exhibits emotional volatility, diminished parental insight, and an inability to provide stable care. For Nora's mental well-being, I strongly recommend full custody be granted to Mr. Hale. The courtroom hummed with shock. Avery felt physically ill. Abernathy rose for cross-examination. Dr. Ward, did you ever interact with my client directly? No, Sophia replied smoothly. That would interfere with natural observation. Did you record these observations? No, but I kept detailed notes. Notes only you have seen? Yes. Abernathy narrowed his eyes. So this entire diagnosis is based solely on your personal interpretation? On my professional interpretation, counselor, she corrected. Abernathy pressed on, but Sophia deflected every challenge with practiced elegance. Each answer tightened the noose around Avery's case. When Sophia stepped down, Cromwell smirked triumphantly, and the worst part, the judge appeared convinced. Avery felt tears burn her eyes. Her truth, her love, her motherhood reduced to dust by a woman secretly sharing Mason's bed, and she felt the full weight of the trap closing. Next, Avery is called to testify, but with Cromwell determined to provoke her and Sophia's lies poisoning the air, one emotional slip could destroy everything. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Mrs. Avery Carter, please take the stand. Avery felt her legs tremble as she stood. Attorney Abernathy whispered, Stay calm. They want you emotional. Don't give them what they want. But it was hard to breathe, let alone stay calm, when everything felt stacked against her. She sat in the witness chair. The room suddenly felt too bright, too silent, too sharp. Abernathy began gently. Mrs. Mises, Carter, can you tell the court about your role in the household? Avery steadied her breath. I left my job when Nora was born. Mason asked me to focus on raising her. I handled everything at home, cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, everything. Let's talk about the photo submitted by the plaintiff, Abernathy continued. Can you explain why the house was messy on those specific days? Avery nodded quickly. I was extremely sick, high fever for 3 days. I could barely stand. I begged Mason to help, but he refused. That's why the house looked like that. Some people in the courtroom murmured. The judge listened, but remained unreadable. And the financial statements? Abernathy asked. I didn't make those purchases, Avery said firmly. Mason often took the card. He told me his own card was maxed out for business expenses. I trusted him. Again, murmurs. Avery felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone believed her, but that flicker was short-lived. Cromwell stood. His presence alone chilled the air. He approached Avery slowly, deliberately, like a predator circling prey. Mrs. Carter, he said with a false smile, let's clarify some things. You claim your husband took the credit card and used it without your consent. Is that correct? Yes. Did you report it to the bank? No. Did you confront your husband about it? No. So, Cromwell concluded loudly, turning to the judge, there is zero proof, zero, that these purchases weren't made by Mrs. Carter herself. Avery's stomach dropped. Cromwell pivoted sharply. And about the photos, you expect the court to believe that your husband happened to take pictures on the 1 week you were conveniently ill? How fortunate for him. It's the truth, Avery stammered. Do you have medical records, hospital visits, prescriptions, anything? No, I just took over-the-counter medicine. Cromwell raised his brows dramatically. No proof at all. Interesting. Avery clenched the edge of the witness stand. Then Cromwell signaled to someone behind him. A screen lit up. A photograph appeared, one Avery remembered too well. Her crying, hair a mess, screaming in her bedroom. Your Honor, Cromwell announced proudly, this is Plaintiff's Exhibit P12. Mrs. Carter in a state of emotional hysteria. Does this look like a stable mother? Avery's breath shattered. That was after Mason insulted me. He called me useless. So you admit you screamed hysterically? Cromwell pounced. Avery froze. He provoked me. So you lose control. Exactly as Dr. Ward testified. No, Avery cried, standing abruptly. He set me up. He recorded me after tormenting me. He's manipulating. Order, the judge boomed, slamming his gavel. Avery sank back down, shaking, her tears unstoppable. She had done exactly what Mason planned. She reacted. She looked unstable. Mason lowered his gaze, pretending to look sad. Sophia observed Avery with a quiet smirk, pleased her lies were working. Cromwell turned to the judge. Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. And the worst part? The judge seemed convinced. When the session adjourned for the day, Avery felt like a hollow shell. Avery, Abernathy whispered, don't lose hope. Something feels off. We're missing a key piece. But Avery could only whisper back, he's taken everything from me. Little did she know, the key piece was already inside the courthouse, walking around with a cracked old tablet hidden in her backpack. As the verdict approaches, Avery prepares for the worst. But Nora is about to make a move no one expected, a move that will turn the entire courtroom upside down. The next morning, the courtroom felt like a tomb. Avery sat motionless at the defense table, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had barely slept. Every hour of the night had been filled with the same thought, I'm going to lose Nora. Attorney Abernathy sat beside her, unusually quiet, reviewing pages he had practically memorized. His jaw was tight, as if bracing for an impact he couldn't stop. Across the room, Mason walked in wearing a fresh suit, looking revitalized, confident. He exchanged a small nod with Attorney Cromwell, who appeared equally sure of himself. And then there was Sophia, dressed in a soft cream dress this time, her expression gentle, poised. Not the slightest hint of guilt crossed her face. She sat behind Mason, legs crossed elegantly, as if she were attending a seminar, not a trial where a family's fate hung in the balance. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Everyone rose, heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the judge begin. In the matter of Mason Hale versus Avery Carter, he said, adjusting his glasses, we are here to present closing arguments before the verdict. Cromwell stood first. He walked with the smooth confidence of a man who believed the battle was already won. Your Honor, he began, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. We have visual proof of neglect, financial recklessness, emotional instability, and expert testimony confirming the defendant's inability to provide a stable environment for young Nora. He pointed briefly at Avery, his voice dripping with feigned sympathy. Carter may love her daughter, but love alone cannot outweigh the danger of instability. Mr. Hale, on the other hand, has shown himself capable, responsible, and deeply committed to Nora's well-being. Avery wanted to scream. Mason was none of those things. He was only capable of cruelty and manipulation, but her voice was trapped behind her fear. Cromwell continued, for the child's best interest, we request that full custody be granted to Mr. Hale and all marital assets be legally transferred per our petition. He sat down with a victorious smile. Now it was Abernathy's turn. He rose slowly, older, gentler, but with a quiet fire behind his eyes. Your Honor, he began softly, what has happened here is not justice. It is character assassination dressed as evidence. A few photographs taken at the worst possible moment do not define motherhood. Credit card statements can be manipulated when one spouse controls the finances. He paused, looking directly at Mason, and an expert who observes from a distance without context can turn any loving mother's reactions into clinical diagnoses. Sophia's expression tightened slightly, but she didn't look away. Abernathy's voice grew stronger. My client is not perfect, no mother is, but she is devoted, caring, and has sacrificed everything for her daughter. She deserves the chance to raise the child she has loved every day since birth. Silence swept through the courtroom. Avery's heart fluttered with the faintest spark of hope. But that hope dimmed when the judge picked up his file. His expression turned stern. Having reviewed the documents and testimonies, Avery held her breath. Oh, the plaintiff, Mr. Hale, has presented significant evidence supporting his claims. Her lungs squeezed painfully. First, the photographs submitted show clear signs of household neglect. Her head dipped. Second, the financial discrepancy. Each word felt like another shard piercing her chest. Third, and most importantly, the expert testimony of Dr. Sophia Ward. Sophia lifted her chin slightly, confident, presents a concerning picture of the defendant's emotional stability. Avery's vision blurred with tears. The judge raised his gavel. With all evidence considered, this court, but before the sentence could be spoken, a small voice cut through the air like lightning. Your Honor, can I show you something? Everyone turned. There, in the doorway, stood Nora, still in her school uniform, clutching her battered old tablet. Avery's heart stopped. Mason jerked upright, panic shattering his calm facade. Nora, what are you doing here? Sit down. Let the child speak, the judge barked. And as Nora walked toward the judge with trembling steps, everything began to crack. Nora steps forward with her hidden tablet containing a secret recorded months earlier. And when she presses play, the entire courtroom will be forced to confront the truth. Every breath in the courtroom seemed to freeze as little Nora walked down the aisle. The cracked tablet rested in her hands like something sacred. Her steps were small, but her bravery filled the room more powerfully than any adult's presence. Avery sat trembling, her heart torn between fear and disbelief. Mason stood half risen from his chair, eyes wide with panic. Even Sophia's perfect posture faltered, her fingers gripping her purse tightly. The judge leaned forward. Nora, sweetheart, who brought you here? My aunt dropped me off, she whispered, but I came in by myself. Mason snapped. Nora, sit down immediately. This isn't. Silence, Mr. Hale, the judge ordered sharply. Let your daughter speak. Nora swallowed hard and looked directly at the judge. Daddy said my mommy is bad. Her voice trembled. But she's not. And I want to show you something mommy doesn't know. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Attorney Cromwell shot up. Your Honor, a child's recording is inadmissible. This is a violation of privacy. This court will decide what is relevant. The judge cut him off. Clerk, bring the tablet. The clerk took the battered device gently from Nora and connected it to the large courtroom screens. Mason lunged forward. No, Your Honor, I object. Sit. Down. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. With shaking hands, Nora pointed at a video file. That one, she whispered. The clerk clicked play. The screen flickered. Then the living room of Avery's home appeared. The angle was low, shaky, as if the device had been hidden behind something. Avery gasped. Behind the plant. Nora's favorite hiding spot. Two figures entered the frame. Mason and Sophia, not in her polished blazer this time, but in casual loungewear, hair down, sitting comfortably on Avery's sofa as if she lived there. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Mason wrapped his arms around Sophia from behind. Her soft laugh filled the speakers. Avery's blood ran cold. The perfume, the late nights, the lies, it was all true. Then Sophia's voice floated through the room. Are you sure your plan will work? Your wife is so clueless? Mason laughed. Of course. I've been setting her up for months. The photos, the money transfers, everything's already done. Avery covered her mouth. Sophia slid onto Mason's lap. And the custody part? Easy, Mason replied smugly. Once the judge thinks she's unstable, Nora's mine. We'll move far away, maybe Switzerland. Start over. Just you, me, and the money. Sophia giggled. And your daughter? She loves Avery. She'll get over it, Mason said. Just give her a fancy tablet and she forgets everything. Kids are simple. Avery broke. Silent tears streamed down her face. Abernathy sat frozen, stunned by the very salvation neither of them saw coming. Cromwell stared at the screen as if his career was burning in front of him. When Mason, in the video, added, I'll provoke Avery until she explodes in court. Dr. Ward's testimony will match perfectly. No one will believe a hysterical woman. The courtroom erupted. Turn it off, Mason screamed, leaping toward the clerk. Bailiff, the judge commanded. Two officers grabbed Mason, twisting his arms behind him as he thrashed wildly. Sophia's face turned ghost white. She tried to slide down in her seat, but there was no hiding. The judge's voice thundered, Play the rest. The ending was brief. Mason and Sophia toasting with wine, laughing at the destruction they planned. Then the screen went black. Silence. The kind of silence that follows a bomb. Nora wiped her eyes and looked at her mother. Mommy, I'm sorry I didn't show you sooner. Avery sobbed openly now, this time with relief, love, and heartbreak tangled together. Nora, she whispered, you saved me. Mason is restrained. Sophia panics. The judge is furious. The courtroom is about to erupt into chaos, and Avery's justice is finally about to begin. Chaos erupted the moment the video ended. Mason fought against the bailiffs holding him, red-faced and sweating, shouting incoherently as if volume alone could erase what everyone had witnessed. His expensive suit was rumpled, his composure shattered. Across the room, Sophia trembled violently. Her elegant posture collapsed as she clutched the edge of her chair, eyes darting wildly toward the exit, only to see officers move to block each door. She looked suddenly small, fragile, stripped of her false authority. Attorney Cromwell appeared ghost-like, standing rigid with his mouth slightly open. The man who had strutted into court with arrogance now looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. His career wasn't just cracked, it was already crumbling. The judge slammed his gavel so hard the sound echoed through every corner of the courtroom. Order! He roared. Silence fell instantly. He turned to the officers. Bring Miss Sophia Ward to the stand, now! Sophia tried to stand, but her knees buckled. The female officer had to help her forward. They placed her in the witness seat that now felt more like a defendant's chair. Her face was pale, eyes glossy with panic. The judge's voice was frigid. Ms. Ward, you took an oath in this courtroom and provided expert testimony. You knowingly lied under oath. You conspired with the plaintiff to manipulate evidence, falsify psychological assessments, and mislead this court. Sophia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The judge continued, tone even harsher. You have committed perjury. You have violated every ethical code of your profession, and you will face the consequences. He then turned sharply toward Cromwell. And you, Attorney Cromwell, did you knowingly submit fabricated evidence and exploit a false expert testimony? Cromwell swallowed hard. Your Honor, I wasn't aware. You should have been aware, the judge snapped. Your conduct will be reported to the Ethics Board immediately. Expect disciplinary action, including probable disbarment. Cromwell's shoulders collapsed. The judge then faced Mason, who was still pinned to the floor by two bailiffs. Mr. Hale, he said, voice trembling with disgust. You brought this court a lawsuit built entirely on lies, manipulation, and cruelty. You attempted to steal your wife's assets, destroy her reputation, and sever a child from her mother. You orchestrated a criminal conspiracy and involved a licensed psychologist in your deception. Mason's face contorted in desperation. She lied to me. She forced me. Sophia's fury snapped free. Lear, she screamed, pointing at Mason. You promised me everything. You told me to say those things. You told me you'd divorce her and marry me. You made me. Arg! Arg! The judge's gavel boomed again. The courtroom felt electrified by tension. The judge drew a long breath, then delivered the words Avery had been praying for. This court hereby dismisses the plaintiff's divorce petition in its entirety. Every accusation against Mrs. Avery Carter is declared invalid and fraudulent. Avery pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes as Abernathy gripped her shoulder proudly, but the judge wasn't finished. He looked at Avery directly, his expression softening. Mrs. Carter, would you like to file your own petition for divorce at this time? Avery stood, tears streaming freely. Yes, Your Honor, I want a divorce. Then it is granted, the judge declared, on grounds of infidelity, fraud, harassment, and malicious intent. Mason whimpered as the words stabbed into the ruin of his plans. And furthermore, the judge continued, voice rising with righteous authority, full and unconditional custody of Nora Hale is granted to her mother, Mrs. Avery Carter. Avery collapsed into her chair, sobbing, not from pain this time, but pure relief. Nora ran to her, throwing her arms around her mother's waist, and Avery hugged her as if she were holding her heart in her hands. The judge slammed his final verdict. Officers, take Mr. Hale and Ms. Ward into custody. They are to be arrested immediately for conspiracy, perjury, theft, and manipulation of court evidence. Mason thrashed as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Sophia sank to the floor, sobbing hysterically. Justice had finally arrived. With Mason and Sophia facing criminal charges, Avery's life begins to rebuild. But the aftermath of the trial brings new revelations, new freedoms, and a heartfelt conversation with Nora that changes everything. Outside the courtroom, the world felt different, lighter, warmer, as if the universe itself had exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Reporters crowded around the courthouse steps, shouting questions about the broken tablet case and the dramatic downfall of Mason Hale and Dr. Sophia Ward. Avery shielded Nora close as Attorney Abernathy guided them through the commotion. "No statements today," he said firmly. "Let mother and daughter go home. Home." The word felt foreign and broken because the house Avery returned to was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. Every corner whispered memories of Mason's cruelty. Every room still carried traces of the lies Sophia had helped build. The walls felt heavy with betrayal. Avery stood in the living room, looking around slowly. "I can't stay here," she whispered. Abernathy nodded gently. "You don't have to. The judge granted you ownership. You can sell it and start fresh." Fresh. That word felt right. Within weeks, Avery sold the house. The money combined with the funds seized from Mason and Sophia's hidden account gave her the chance to rebuild. Mason had stolen nearly $1 million from her over the years, funneling it into Sophia's pocket. Now every dollar was returned to Avery's new account by order of the court. Mason and Sophia didn't escape consequences. Mason received a 12-year prison sentence for fraud, perjury, and theft. Sophia was sentenced to 8 years and stripped of her psychologist license permanently. Attorney Cromwell faced disciplinary action and was disbarred for unethical conduct. Justice had struck like lightning, but the real healing began 3 months later. Avery and Nora now lived in a modest, cheerful 3-bedroom apartment. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, and the scent of Avery's homemade cookies filled the air. The walls were decorated with photos, just the two of them, no shadows of Mason, no ghosts of the life she had barely survived. Avery had started her own home-based catering business. Her cooking, once mocked by Mason, was now her greatest asset. Orders came in steadily, and neighbors praised her recipes. She found purpose in work she actually loved. Nora thrived too. She laughed more. She slept peacefully. She played in the local park without tension lingering around her shoulders. One afternoon, while Nora played with flowers in the soil, Avery sat beside her on a bench. "Nora," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" Nora looked up, dirt smudged on her little hand. "Yes, Mommy, the video you recorded. Why did you make it?" Nora's brows furrowed as she tried to remember. "Because I didn't like Dr. Sophia," she said simply. "She pretended to be nice, but she would say mean things when you weren't looking. At the mall, she told Daddy you take too long. And in the park, she said you weren't watching me, but you were." Avery felt her heart swell and break all at once. "And that night, Daddy came home early," Nora continued. "I heard the door and wanted to show him my drawing, but I saw him with her." Avery swallowed hard. "And you hid behind the plant?" Nora nodded. "That's where my old tablet was. And you always say if someone is doing something wrong, there should be proof. So I recorded." Avery's breath hitched. She had forgotten she'd ever said that to her daughter. "But why didn't you tell me?" Avery whispered. Nora's eyes softened. "Daddy told Sophia you wouldn't know because you were, stupid. So I thought it was a secret. I didn't want Daddy to get mad." A tear slipped down Avery's cheek. "But in court," Nora continued, voice trembling, "they were going to take me away from you. And that wasn't right. You're not bad, Mommy. You're the best Mommy." Avery pulled her daughter into her arms, tears falling freely. For months she had believed Mason's cruel words, that she had failed, that she wasn't enough. But here, in her arms, was proof she had raised a brave, brilliant, loving little girl. She had never failed. Not for a second. With their new life beginning, one final chapter remains. Avery's full transformation, the rebuilding of her future, and the message she leaves for every woman who has ever doubted her worth. Months passed, and life settled into a calmer rhythm, something Avery once believed she would never experience again. The weight that once pressed on her chest was finally gone, replaced by a sense of peace she had never known in her marriage. Her new apartment was modest compared to the old house, but to Avery and Nora it felt like freedom. The walls were bright, decorated with Nora's hand-painted artwork. Fairy lights hung across the living room window, glowing warmly every evening as they baked cookies together. There were no slammed doors, no insults disguised as jokes, no cold silences that made Avery feel invisible, just laughter and healing. Avery's catering business flourished unexpectedly fast. What she had once felt guilty doing, because Mason insisted her cooking wasn't good enough for anyone but the family, had now become her pride. She crafted menus full of comfort food and homemade treats, and soon neighbors, offices, and even small event planners began placing orders. People loved her food. They loved her. The praise soothed wounds she didn't know she still carried. One crisp morning, Avery found Nora sitting on their small balcony, drawing flowers in her sketchbook. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Avery asked, lightly brushing her daughter's hair. Nora beamed. "Our new home, and a garden we don't have yet, but I want one someday." Avery smiled. "We'll plant one together soon," Nora nodded proudly. "And I'm drawing Attorney Abernathy, too. I want to give it to him next time." Avery's heart softened. He'd love that. Behind them, the TV quietly played a local news report. Avery's attention drifted when she heard familiar names. Mason Hale and Dr. Sophia Ward's sentencing continues to make headlines. The court's ruling has been praised as a landmark case against spousal manipulation and fabricated psychological reports. Avery exhaled slowly. It wasn't joy she felt. It was closure. Mason had spent years undermining her, belittling her, convincing her she was worthless. He had almost succeeded in destroying her life completely. But the truth had risen, and his empire of lies had collapsed in front of the world. Sophia, too, faced consequences she once believed herself above. The woman who had manipulated psychology to harm another mother had become a cautionary tale. Avery turned away from the television. Their chapter in her story was closed. Later that evening, Avery and Nora walked to the park, a place that once held painful memories of Sophia's lies, but now bloomed with new beginnings. Nora ran to the swings, her laughter echoing across the grass. Avery sat on a bench, watching her daughter fly higher and higher, her hair dancing in the wind. Freedom looked like this. A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Carter?" Avery turned to find her neighbor, Mrs. Daniels, holding an empty casserole dish. "Your baked ziti was the best thing I've tasted. Are you taking more catering orders next week?" Avery grinned. "I'd be happy to." For the first time in years, she looked forward to tomorrow, not with fear, but excitement. When Nora returned from the swing set, breathless and smiling, Avery crouched to her level. "You know, Nora, you're the bravest little girl I've ever known." Nora giggled. "And you're the strongest mommy ever." Avery pressed a kiss to her forehead, tears pricking her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Their old life was ashes. Their new life was a garden waiting to bloom. And Avery, once convinced she was weak, now knew the truth. She had survived the fire. She had risen from it. And she would never let anyone dim her again. Only one chapter remains. Avery's final reflection on everything she overcame and the message she wants every woman in her situation to hear. The evening sun painted the apartment in soft gold, casting warm light across the walls where Avery had hung photos of her and Nora, smiling, laughing, living freely. The images were a quiet triumph, proof that they had survived what should have broken them. Avery stood by the kitchen counter, finishing the last batch of cupcakes for a catering order. The sweet scent of vanilla filled the air, mixing with the sound of Nora's cheerful humming from the living room. Every now and then, Nora peered over the back of the couch to show her mother another drawing. Today's sketch was a bold, colorful picture of a superhero mom and a little girl holding a tablet like a shield. Avery smiled. "I love it," she whispered, and she meant it. The drawing wasn't just cute, it was symbolic. Nora had saved her. Once, Avery thought motherhood was the one thing Mason might never take from her, but he had tried. He had twisted her love into a weapon, made her doubt herself, made her feel small, incompetent, unworthy. But now, as she looked around her peaceful home, she realized something powerful. Mason's lies had failed. Sophia's manipulation had failed. She had won, not just legally, but spiritually. Later that night, Avery and Nora sat on the balcony overlooking their quiet neighborhood. The stars were faint but visible, the moon low, gentle. Nora leaned against her mother, swinging her legs, as Avery wrapped an arm protectively around her. "Mommy?" Nora asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you happy now?" The question hit Avery in the chest, not because the answer was complicated, but because her daughter had finally felt safe enough to ask it. Avery kissed the top of Nora's head. "I am," she said gently. "I'm really, truly happy." "Even without Daddy?" Avery hesitated, not out of pain, but out of honesty. "Yes," she answered. "Sometimes the people we think will love us forever are the ones who hurt us the most. And when that happens, leaving isn't failure, it's freedom." Nora thought about that for a second, then nodded as if storing the wisdom for later. Avery continued, her voice soft but strong. "And you know what? You saved me. You were so brave, Nora. You showed the truth when no one else could." Nora smiled shyly, tucking her face into her mother's side. "I just didn't want them to take me away." Avery closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "That was never going to happen. I would have fought for you until my last breath." They stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter tangled together under the night sky, no longer afraid of tomorrow. Eventually, Nora drifted off to sleep in Avery's lap. Avery carried her inside, tucking her gently into bed. She lingered there, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, feeling overwhelmed with love. This peace, this warmth, this safety was what she had fought for. And now, standing in the quiet of her new home, Avery finally understood something she wished she could tell every woman who had ever been pushed down, dismissed, or silenced. You are not weak, you are not worthless, and you are not alone. Sometimes strength is quiet. Sometimes it's hidden beneath years of sacrifice and exhaustion. Sometimes it rises only when everything else collapses. But when it rises, it is unstoppable. Avery stepped into her living room, looked around at the life she rebuilt with her own hands, and smiled. A real, radiant smile she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't the woman Mason tried to destroy. She wasn't the broken shell Sophia tried to portray. She was Avery Carter, a mother, a survivor, a woman reborn. And her story had only just begun. Did you like the story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep creating more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. There's a lot more waiting for you on my channel. Tales by Aunt Emery. Don't forget to subscribe.